Can you stop them? Oh, it won't come here. Thank you for waiting. My name is Eva Hartell. I'm a former STEM teacher, mostly taught 9 to 16-year-olds in Sweden, and in science, technology, and engineering and math. And after a while, I was sort of questioning my own research, and I wanted to become a special aid teacher. So I started that journey as well. But all of a sudden, there was this opportunity for teachers, practicing teachers, to become researchers. And I thought, well, research, well, that's not for me, because I love children. I want to be in the classroom. And researchers, I had this really bizarre view of researcher, but people being up in an ivory tower, up in the clouds somewhere, and I don't want to be like that. But I thought, why not take a chance and do it? And I'm very pleased that I did, because that's where I found the literature regarding formative assessment. For instance, the work of Black and William. Dylan Williams' work has been a great influence on my anyway. And I usually do workshops on formative assessment, mostly also in technology and engineering subjects. My thesis was in technology and engineering. And but today I will talk about comparative judgment. How many of you have ever heard about comparative judgment? Yeah, I guess you've heard. Maybe you have read the Didactif journal. Yeah. Comparative, I'm not sure how, it seems to be quite familiar to you. In Sweden it's not that familiar, it's quite rare actually. But I use it as a research method, but I will talk about what you can do with it. Well, not all the things you can do with it, some of it. And I have to acknowledge my colleagues, Greg Strimel and Scott Bartholomew from Purdue University, and also Niall, Andrew and Jeff, who is at KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, which is my university. They're from Ireland originally. And also I should mention that I work as a school developer, researcher, also in Haninge. It's a municipality just south of Stockholm. Actually the same municipality where I used to teach my wonderful pupils. Anyway, my main interest is formative assessment. Also self-efficacy and assessment literacy is my interest, and I am always, as a teacher and now as a researcher, been interested in to develop education where it matters the most, within the classrooms. And the relationship between here and between teacher and learner, between learners and also the learner herself. And that's some of the projects that I've been involved in. But as a Swede, I have to talk about the weather. We always do that when we run out of topics or when we meet new people. And for instance, I heard about this horrible storm you had here. I hope that you were all okay. And also, we can talk about how warm it is. Do you think it's warm in here? No, it's kind of cold. But do you think it's like colder outside than in here? Yeah, can we agree upon that? Anyone disagree? No? How much colder is it outside than inside here? Should we say 20 degrees? Do you agree? 15? 18? 18 and a half? Yes. Can we be that precise just by feeling? We could use a thermometer. That's really hard to pronounce. A thing like this. Yeah. And we can actually measure quite distinct on what the difference between here and there. But we have at least three grading scales: Celsius, Fahrenheit, and Kelvin. And we had to agree upon that. In education, it's not that easy to measure what is better or worse, or it's not as easy as to just measure the temperature. So in terms of quality, this is from one of the schools in Haninge where I work. The teacher has made an example of what quality is in arts. So there's a quality difference here. How many of you do you think the one on the top is the best? Could you raise your hand? Yeah. Anyone think this one is the best? Most often when I do this sort of similar presentations, everyone agrees upon this is the best. But with one exception. I had a seminar at the school where there was 2 arts teachers. That's very rare to have 2 arts teachers in the same school. And what a lovely discussion they had. Because one of them said, hey, no, that is not the best. This one is the best. Because he was more into abstract art. And they were like, wow, like this. And all other teachers were also involved. But the conclusion was, it depends on what we're looking for. If it is an art task with abstract art, maybe this one is better than this one, even though this one might be prettier. So it depends what you're looking for. These are the knowledge requirements. There are criteria stated in the national syllabus in Sweden. We have teacher-based assessment, by the way. It's the teacher who decides on the grading. And to quote Winnie the Pooh, he says something similar to, it's better to know what to look for before you start looking for it. I think it's quite clever. He also says, if you don't know where you're going, you can never get lost. And that's also important, to be upfront, clear with your students, to provide criteria for success and learning intentions upfront with your students, and continuously working on that. Of course, it's not a narrow path that everyone goes in the same direction like this. You can end up at different spots, but at least you know that you have taken another direction compared to where you were supposed to be going. Anyway, when assessing open-ended tasks with big, hairy, audacious goals, as in engineering, as in design and technology, as in written essays, that's really hard to assess written essays, and it's even harder to be in agreement and consistent with your colleagues on what is quality. Is this an A or a B or whatever? And you end up with a pile of work, and perhaps you did not think in advance what you were looking for, so you had this big pile of work. I've been there, and I've been thinking, what am I supposed to do with all these things? Then after a while, you can sort them out. Like this is the good pile of student work, and this is perhaps not as good, and this really needs to have some serious considerations. So you sort of order them, even though we have a criteria-based assessment system in Sweden, we sort of organize it. And it turns out like this, sort of from better to worse. And I've talked to quite a few teachers, and they do this intuitively, not explicitly. They can't explicitly why they do this, sort of. But it's worth it. But here we can use a method called comparative judgment to put words on what teachers do without to make their tacit knowledge more explicit, perhaps, and to organize this. And I'll use, it's called comparative adjustment. Yeah, comparative judgment. You compare 2 pieces of work at a time, and you decide this one is better. You don't have to say how much better it is. Not 50% or 13.5%. You just, this one is better. And then you present every 2 other pieces of work, and then you say, oh, this one is better. It's not the best, it's just better than that one. You compare pairwise all the time. Similar to, it's warmer in here than outside, but we don't have to decide how much warmer it is. I've used a pair engine, a cloud-based pair engine, who facilitates this, but you can do this with the papers like this also. You just compare 2 and 2, and you put maybe a bullet or something, one, and then you can count on how many who won your round, sort of. Anyway, this is Multimodal E-Portfolios. So students did a design task, and they had written during the process. They've been asked to talk about their process, then also recorded some film. So there's massive amount of data here, which also makes it more complicated to assess. But through this pair engine, it will become easier. So a teacher can press here and they get this video recorded. And if these are the e-portfolios, or the pieces of students' work, it can be essays, whatever, half of them will win, and then the second half, and again, around again, half of them will win, because they meet. There's a mathematical formula for this, how many times they will meet. And what you end up with is, well, you could say it's a rank order. If you have a normative assessment system, it would be really easy to say, well, this is the A and B and C. But in a criteria-based assessment system, it isn't that easy. All of these could be an A. It depends on your criteria. So you have to go back and forth here. But what emerges is a professional consensus regarding the order of these student work within the group of judges. It's not universal. But if we have 10 teachers and they do this pairwise, within the 10 teacher group, they have a consensus. And in the software system that I use, it looks like this. And each of these are student work, and I can press, for instance, 15, and I can see the portfolio. And then I can press somewhere here, and I will see, this is a blurry photo, I can see the sketch, the drawing that the student did on paper. And we can also see that they did blueprints like this on the software. And here we can actually spot some errors. This is not correct way of, I don't remember the name in English now, but this is not correct. And then we can provide feedback, and then we have something to discuss about also. There's also this power of the collective. If we do this together, if we somehow can assess student work together, we together can stand for the results also. You don't have to be alone. Some of you might listen to the previous presentation, but had this cartoon where the teachers were like all alone, and the parents were like, "What's wrong with this grade?" It's not good for teachers to be all alone in this. And I think that technology can be the facilitator to actually make it easier for teachers to collaborate. Anyway, we had 25 e-portfolios, and we had 5 teachers who assessed them. Took them about an hour. We had Mary. She took twice as much time as the others. But together, they could reach a consensus of 0.93, which is rather big. That's really, really high. And there has been a discussion about the reliability that is so high. But that's one of the benefits with research, that it's an open process, and someone else will look into that kind of things, and we will help each other out to sort problematic things together. We can have a discussion about that later. But anyway, they did this together, and they sort of helped. What if Mary would have been all alone in this? It would have taken her forever, I think. I've done it 4 times. And I know there are works going on here in Holland and in Belgium on comparative judgment. There's a lot of things going on in England right now. Maybe you have heard of Daisy Christodoulou and Noah Marking. They're doing massive sort of comparative judgment sessions. And also, I'm very inspired by the works of Richard Kimball and Kay Stables also.
Can I just ask a question? Because the execution of it is still not very clear to me. Because is one teacher then doing how many?
Thank you for.
And the reports are being done by how many teachers?
No.
Twice?
You can do. It depends. Depends on how many student work you have.
But
And-
previous example, for instance,
How many, like this?
Yeah.
Well, it took them about, this is the time, it took 1 hour. And on average time, they spent about 2 minutes per folio.
But she did,
She did,
30 projects or not?
Yeah, 30 pair-wise.
Comparisons.
But, yeah, comparison.
From two reports.
Yeah,
And every time a different
Yeah.
pair. And those pairs are also done by the other teachers.
yes, yeah. You don't get to see all of them. Perhaps you don't get to see all of the same pairs as your colleague does. The pair engine provides them with different pairs. In this system, if you do it on paper,
Yeah.
you can do as you like. But it depends. It goes quite fast. And it depends on how many student work you are, and also how many teachers that are involved. You can do this by yourself also. If you have, for instance, your former class of year 9, their pieces of work, and you can add them on to the class that you have now, and do this to check your own consistency also. Do you identify the quality last year as you do this year? Yeah, I've done it twice in mostly STEM subjects, chemistry and engineering. It's been a lot of work in English and even in Swedish. So. Anyway, you can find really interesting statistics in this, which is fun, of course. And if we reach high reliability on the rank order, well, that's fine. But I'm more interested in why. Why do we reach this high consensus? So in order to unpack more about teachers' assessment practices, what criteria for success do they focus on? How can we make that more explicit? So that's why we had these 25 portfolios, and meanwhile the 5 teachers were doing it. They were thinking out loud and justify their choice. So we had recordings, MP3 players, and they were like, I choose this one because of. And then I choose this one because of. So we have massive amount of qualitative data also to add on. And what were they looking for? Well, they were looking for the narrative of the portfolio because it was a design task. It's not that surprising, but it was rather pleasing to see that. And it was in agreement within the qualitative data also. But they made a holistic judgment on the narrative of the portfolios. Here they are sitting in a library. That's what. It's only the reason because we wanted to talk to them before and after they were doing this comparative judgment. They could have been in Alaska, they could have been in Amsterdam, perhaps even on the moon, because it's cloud-based, so you work through the internet, which opens up for international comparatives also. So, as a researcher, I think this is really interesting. But what about the teachers? I, as a researcher, just can't go and tell people what to do. I would never do that, and I don't think it's ethical. So what do they think? Well, most of them say, well, the great majority, almost everyone says, it's very interesting to see other than my own students' work, to experience, to get a flavor of what is happening within other classrooms. How often do you, as a teacher, have the opportunity to actually dig into someone else's work? Not that often. I mean, I guess you are working, you have a working load like this, I'm sure, but also it's problematic to organize also. But this can give you, invite others to your practice. I see many opportunities for comparative judgment for summative purposes, especially if you have a normative grading system. But I mean, that's not the key here. I think it's more valuable for formative purposes, to find out where the learners are. They made this very nice study at the University of Limerick with teacher students. They had this task and they had criteria. I think they even had a rubric, trying to make the criteria for success explicit. And then they had the students were doing their design task, and then they had, for instance, it worked for a couple of weeks, and then after a while they did comparative judgment on each other's work. So the students compared the other students' work pairwise. And in the evaluation, and then they could continue to work with their task. In the evaluation of this was, the student said, oh, now I know what you're looking for. Oh, I got this marvelous idea from my student peer. And also they could provide feedback to each other on how to move forward. So sort of peer feedback. I will share these slides with you, and I will provide a link so that you can read about the study more. It was made by Donald Camp. Teacher training, to get to be exposed to authentic student work during training would be really interesting to find out. And also moderation, as I said before, if you do comparative judgment on your pile of work from this year 9 and you compare it with this pile of work that you have from last year, and you can mix it up and you can moderate yourself. And also on a school level, do we agree? Like these teachers, the art teachers, it was the first time to ever have a discussion on quality in arts. Maybe we should have to facilitate more of these arenas for teachers to discuss the quality on a school level, but also perhaps on the individual level. Yes, you can use it for ranking schools, but if you are interested in that, don't call me, because I really think that's a waste of time. But as a research method, and here comes the international study that I will talk more about. We have a lot of international studies, and we can do curriculum studies, read the documents. We can even have students taking different tests and then compare. Have you heard about PISA perhaps? You can also, like we did, this is revolutionary. No, it's not, but we think it's rather interesting. We wanted to see if there was differences between England, America, and Sweden in terms of technology education, because it's a field called technology education. But is there any preferences within these countries? We just did this pilot, and these are my friends, and we work through Skype because they are on the other side of the pond in America. It's Scotland. And doing international comparisons is difficult with the language. For instance, chaps. This is just an example, but chaps. It's leather pants for horseback riding. It's the exact word in Swedish as well, chaps. But chaps can be guys, also friends in the UK. But it's the same word. Also, we have different we have money, and it's as easy to spend either of these, but they look kind of different. And we have subjects that can be. We talk about a specific subject, as it is the same subject in different parts of the world, which is not. A technology education, more of a vocational background in America. In the UK, they focus a lot on the design process. In Sweden, we focus on environmental, technological system, and also the design process and the history of technologies. Many similarities, but a lot of differences. We also have something that we have to acknowledge is the differences in assessment practices. In Sweden, we have teacher-based assessment. We don't have any national test who says what grade the student should have. We only have some just for moderation. Whereas in America, they also, they have some I won't go into that, but they focus on assessing the product and the process separately. And that upset a lot of the people in the UK because they assess the process. They're not that particularly interested in the product. The process is the thing. Whereas in Sweden, we do a little bit of both. We do we don't have this as clear. So it's different. It's very important to acknowledge these differences before you sort of dig into what's happening. And we wanted to unpack it more than just looking at documents. We provided a training session for asked around for judges to be involved in this. It was teachers, teacher trainers, and all the teacher trainers had a background as technology teachers, and also educational researchers. But everyone had a background as technology. In America, and the UK, and in Sweden. About 10 people in each country. We used student portfolios from America, because Americans and you Englishmen are not that good you're not that fluent in Swedish. So we used American students. We had 760 students involved, and we had 175 portfolios and 175 products. They were working in groups, students. And these judges judged it by comparative judgment. The UK and the US and the Swedes separately, because we were just curious what we would find out. Oh, I've said that. And just to give you a brief insight, the results show we focused on the top 10 and the bottom 10. We could see some differences. Some of the products the products did not appear on the top 10 within the three contexts. We don't actually know exactly why, but that was something we found. And it's the same with the portfolios. And we had this, for some reason, the group 122, they stand out somewhat because they were more present on the top 10 within these three countries. Why? What's so funny? What's so nice about this one? Well, we had the comments also. We could have just looked at the statistics, but I don't find that it's not as qualitative. We had, instead of think alouds, we had them to write comments. It's not as good, I think, when people write comments. It's better, it will be more spontaneous when they can talk. It's an awful lot of work for the researcher to transcribe it later, but it's worth the while. But it was impossible here, so they wrote comments within the system. And we could see, we're working on this at the moment, and we could see some differences even in the comments. It seems like the Swedes are looking more for less is more, whereas the American Swedish design, confirmation bias went like this. And the Americans, they're like more bling bling thing. And well, I don't know why, but it seems like that. And one funny thing that occurred was that the Englishmen took the longest time to do these comparative judgments. I thought it would be the Swedes because of the language barrier, but they could do it quite fast. So we were just, we were just curious. That was what was driving us. And we can see that comparative judgment is a good tool to do comparative between countries, to dig deeper than just to look at curriculums, because we all know that even though the curriculum is really good, it's not enacted in the practice always. There's a gap between the written curriculum and the enacted curriculum. This is one way. And of course, something really, really important is the design how to design the tasks. How can we design a task that really elicit evidence of learning? Well, we have to think ahead. What sort of evidence do we need? So if we were to do this again, we would focus more on how we would design the task, so that students would have the opportunity to learn while doing it, or learn more. And so why is this important? Why on earth would you? I'm really happy that you came, but I want you to have something to take away from here. Maybe you can use comparative judgment to compare with different schools, to talk about quality. You can check consistency for yourself over the years. Do you still value? Has your values regarding quality within your subject, this is very subject specific, changed over the years? Do we within this school agree upon what quality is? Especially important when you have teacher-based assessment, it's a matter of equity also. We need somewhere to talk about this. And here comes another, I'm not sure if it's a metaphor or whatever, but have you ever been to a wine tasting?
No.
Yeah? Well, my uncle, he's a wine connoisseur. This is a true story. And when he travels around in France, he can't bring all the wines back home. So what do? Well, at the vineyard, he has maybe 7 different kinds of wine, and he sips. I don't think he spits, but he sips. And he says, oh, this one is better than that one. And then he compares, this one is better than that one. And that's what he does comparative judgment. But he was not aware of that. But that was a method that he sort of discovered himself. And what criteria does he use? Well, he says he uses a criteria that he has embodied somehow. All the criteria, he wants a wine for that specific dish that he makes at home. Because if you try wine without food, it tastes different. So he imagines the taste of the food while he does this comparisons of the wines. And then he says he has this very best wine, which he brings back to Sweden. And when he told me this, I was like, wow, this is exactly what this comparative judgment is about. And we need the proof. What are we looking for? Some sort of agreement there. And future research on this, I think it would be really nice if we could develop self-efficacy and assessment literacy and a connoisseurship of technology engineering. Connoisseur, what is quality? How can we talk about this? How can we describe this? How can we grow our professional language in this? And I think comparative judgment is an excellent tool to do this. And this is what I'm hoping to do more of, done a little. And the illustration is there are a couple of judges, and they can provide perhaps feedback here, and they can get feedback. We can look into what kind of criteria for success, and we have the think aloud protocols or the comments, and we can perhaps make examples of this. And we can, in the software, we can look at this, and we can actually hear the student voice here. And we can look into another portfolio and hear the student voice, not just the written pieces of work. Well, we can go on. And what I would love, and this is one of my projects, the outcomes of one of my ongoing projects now, is to develop exemplars. Exemplars of student work. It's in programming. But I think that it can be done in different kinds of subjects, but it's very subject specific. And let your student work with these exemplars of different kinds. Instead of a rubric describing only in words what quality is, it's better to have the authentic student work. It's like wine. We can read a lot about wine, but if we don't taste the wine, how can we embody that knowledge? And so let learners, I'm not sure if this is correct English, but let your learners, your students, or teachers, or student teachers, the learners is not just the students. Let them work with others' learners' work. Different kinds. It could be an essay, a poem, whatever. And making the criteria for success more explicit. First key strategies or formative assessment, for instance. And I see a lot of benefits on this. Data is collected during ordinary lessons, which increases the validity, I think, at least in design, because then the students can take a photo from this perspective instead of that. Perhaps a teacher would take a photo from this view and missed out on the very important detail that the students have. And also about teacher workload, documenting is a massive discussion in Sweden, how the teachers have to document everything. If we can invite the students to be involved in the documenting, I think, I'm not sure, but I think it will decrease perhaps the workload on documenting for teachers. And it's a decision-driven data collection. You know, if you if you know what to look for before you start looking for it, instead of just collect data and have no idea what you want to do with it. That in terms of how to design the task is very important. Sort of reliable results and consistency, and also inviting other professionals to your classroom. That was what the teacher said to me. That was most valuable for them. And the power of the collective. To be continued, as always. Sometimes you want like a recipe, tell me what to do, but I can't provide that. But there are always more opportunities to learn more about all things. And one opportunity for you to learn more is to come and visit me in Haninge, in Sweden. You could say Stockholm. Very close. In March 10. Hey, there are at least 4 Swedes there, so it would be really nice some Dutch people or English or wherever you come from to come over. We have an excellent speaker session. And please, thank you for listening. Sorry about the delay for the start. And please contact me and ask questions. And you are, of course, how do you say it? You can ask questions now also, of course. But if you don't want to, you can talk during the lunch or you can email. So thank you for listening.